I'd like to introduce Carmel Bell. She is an experienced medical intuitive for over 30 years. She was also the founder and president of the Australian Medical Intuitives Association, or the AMIA. She had her first near-death experience at the age of 4. From then on, she saw energy around people and objects, but was not aware that this was unusual. Carmel had first-hand experiences of suffering from burns, cardiac arrest, heart issues, and other medical complications from which she had learnt to heal herself with Metatronic Energy. In another part of her life, she managed a high-end fashion and bespoke company and ran a cocktail lounge in a nightclub. She resides in Melbourne, Victoria, Australia, and she will talk to you about the side effects of dying and coming back to life. So please welcome Carmel.
Thanks. Now, I'm on? Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Beautiful. Thanks, Joyce. Lovely to see you.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, you too.
No one has an NDE for no reason. It is up to you, the NDE, to find the reason. How do you do that? By becoming a detective in your own life. Now, my father, who has just recently died, had a number of NDEs like me. Between his first and his last, which led to his death, my father discovered that he loved life, his family, and exploring. He became a psychotherapist when he started out in life as an intelligence officer, or as we know them, spies, then a pharmacist. Somewhere in the midst of all that, he discovered he had a terminal disease, but he outlived his oncologist by more than 30 years and died a peaceful man surrounded by family who loved him immensely, of which I am one. He taught all of us that it is possible to change and that sometimes the simplest of things, the sweetest of moments, mean the most. That forgiveness is what really matters, letting go of what is holding you down. That being frightened didn't mean you could not walk away or could walk away. And above all, trust yourself and God. And for those who are unfamiliar with me, my last near-death experience was for about an hour, and I do have residual brain damage, so I do have to read what I wrote. Prior to dying, I didn't have to. I have a history of arguing with God and priests in particular, for many reasons, but chief to them all was the insistence that I called God Father. I prefer to be on a first name basis, and I had a father. On one of the darkest days of my life, when I sat alone crying, he came and sat next to me, held my hand and sighed gently. That was the sum total of our conversation, and that was all I needed. I knew he had heard me and that it was from my heart to his ears, to God. We don't need priests so much as we need people who can sit with us and listen, even if you aren't speaking. God put us on earth to have a human life, not to try to be spiritual, for we already are. He wanted us to feel humanity, and this is what I learned in heaven. A great human is a strong human, a kind human, a fierce human, and a protector of those who cannot defend themselves. Humans speak too much and listen far too little. In the silence is where the messages are hidden. God speaks in silence, in the wind, in the rain, in the tears. Humans who listen hear that, and they will hear when your heart and soul are in pain. My whole life has been directed by my NDEs, and I admit that I am a slow learner. You do not have to die to realise that you need to change. The entire purpose behind my NDEs was to make me into a medical intuitive and to train me by giving me conditions that are considered traditionally unfixable. If I wanted to live, I had to find a way to fix them. Having died 4 times, it is fair to say that I've had a bit of experience with the side effects. And having that many experiences, I have been able to stand back, review my life to see most of the effects I have incurred. I don't claim to see them all, but I hope I spotted two major ones. One truth for me that I live by now is that everything that happens in your life from the moment you are revived is a side effect. Once you have an NDE, your life from that moment forward is a side effect, and a very loud message as well. But you will miss the message if you are too loud. If you don't review your life where it is, to where you feel compelled to go, not a career, but what you need to learn, study, feel, give up, and walk away from. You will lose people too in this process. About 85% of marriages, legal or otherwise, end after an NDE. But if a person was meant to stay in your life, they will stay. The people who did not know you very well and were an impediment to your life will walk away. So an NDE is a message sent from heaven. To explain the side effects, I will briefly talk about each prior death and how they colluded to add up to my life today. So, my first death was in July 1966 when I was 4 years old, or 4.5 years of age. I woke early in the morning and, unable to return to sleep, I got up to do some housework. I enjoy housework and my mother didn't. Because it was cold, I turned on a little radiator despite having been told that I must never touch this thing. I have a habit of doing precisely what I'm told not to do, and that has never changed. Typical of that time, the radiator had very little protection to stop things falling into it. And as I just recently had a hernia operation, I was wearing a wafty nightgown, not pajamas as I usually wear. The doctor didn't want any pressure put onto my abdomen, so had requested that I wear nightgowns while my wound was healing. My nightgown swung into the heater, and when I actually realised that my legs were hurting and something was burning, I looked down to find that my nightgown was well ablaze. And I did what any 4-year-old who hadn't been taught to stop, drop and roll. I ran. My father woke up, noticed a light on further up the house, then realised with horror that the light was flickering like flames. He leapt out of bed and ran, finding me on the floor burning. By then, the small flames were over most of me and just starting to melt a nylon scarf that I'd tied around my head to hold my hair back. He beat out the flames with his hands, wrapped me in a blanket, patted me rather firmly all over, and then carried me to his car. He threw me in the back seat and raced towards the local hospital, because we lived in a country town back then, and there was just a small hospital. Somewhere amidst all that, I was given the chest thump I needed, and I started breathing again. I have no idea of how long I was gone for. I just knew that I had. During that brief experience, I found myself in heaven, and I was introduced to beings who called themselves Metatron and Jesus. Later on, my two main guides joined in the conversation that we were having, and I was told, literally, that I was to become a non-doctored doctor. They knew that I actually did want to be a medical doctor, and they told me that I could not become that if I was to follow my path. I lived in a family that had a very strong medical ethos. Most of our family friends were doctors, as was my godfather, or pharmacists, as was my father. So it seemed natural to me to follow in those footsteps, and nobody thought anything of it. Once in heaven, Metatron told me that this dream would not be possible if I was to follow my path. For some reason not explained to me, it was important that I became a medical intuitive, not that this term was used. I was also told, when I felt overwhelmed by this knowledge, that I would meet a man named Bernie, and hang on to that name, and that he would be instrumental in helping me with this path. Bernie and I were meant to marry and have children. He passed me a ball of energy from his hand to mine. And this ball, like when he put it into my hand, it swirled and it was silver with all these magnificent speckles of color into it. And then it just disappeared into my palm and I could feel it running up my arm and into my chest. This was, he told me, his energy, and it was for me to use as needed. I spent a considerable amount of time in the country hospital waiting for the worst burns to heal enough so that I could go home. From time to time, I would use the energy that I had been given, but not knowing how to use it, I would just sweep my hands over anywhere that hurt, and it seemed to help, so I continued. The interesting thing with that is when I was in that country hospital, there was a night nurse that would come on, and I had gone back to wetting my bed. So during the night, I would wet the bed and there'd be blood-filled urine all over my bed, and the nurse would wake me up. I was sharing a room with an elderly lady who was mostly unconscious, and she would check my bed, and if it was wet, despite me being covered in bandages, she would spank me. And then she told me that if I told anyone, she would kill me. And so I actually was in terror for most of the time that I was in hospital, but that began a similar series of episodes through my life where I was bullied by people that I felt I had no power over. But that too was a very important lesson because I learned to stand up to bullies regardless of what threats they placed on me. My body is covered in scars from this fire, but they are very small, so you cannot notice them, or there's a few that you can, like on my thigh and across my chest, there are some scars you can, but mostly it's like a hair follicle burn. And almost every hair follicle on my legs is a scar, but what that means in practical terms is that I don't need to wax or shave my legs more than, say, once a year. When I came back from the hospital to home, I thought about what I had been told, and I talked to my mum a little, and I learned about Metatronic, but the Bible version. Then I tried to continue on with my life. My mother told me in later years that she felt she had given birth to one child who was happy, friendly, always singing and getting into trouble, and was handed back a little girl she no longer recognised. I wanted to wear only black. I wasn't interested in playing with others, preferring to be on my own. So she started to call me Blackie rather than Carmel. Not long after the fire, my godfather died. Before he died, he'd come to the country town we lived in to visit me. When he scooped me up in his arms and he hugged me to his chest, I leaned back, I placed my hand over his chest, and I asked him what was wrong there. He laughed and told me it was nothing, then popped me down. That was the last time I saw him or my godmother, his wife. Jerry died of a heart attack less than 2 weeks later. As I said, he was a doctor. We moved back to Melbourne again a few months after that. And from living in a country town that was reasonably free and safe, we were in the city where we had to be far more cautious. Ironically, I met my first Bernie in that time. He was the father of a girl who became my best friend. And the way that I actually met him was it was around the time that the Beaumont children were kidnapped, if you know of those children. And one day at this Catholic school, somebody turned off the water. So it was quite a warm day and it was around lunchtime. And what the school did was it made an announcement that all the children had to leave the school. They couldn't have the children there with no water. That was a legal requirement. And they set about ringing the parents that they could to get in touch with. So there was a swarm of primary school children out in the side street and the main road by ourselves with no parental supervision, which felt like a lot of fun. And I had met this girl, Kathy, whose father was Bernie, in my class. And we decided for a lark that we would go out onto the main road and we would pretend to be hitchhiking. We'd pretend that we were like grown-ups and we were hitchhiking. when this car stopped in front of Kathy and I, and this man pushed open the passenger door and he asked us to get into his car and told us that he had lollies in there that we would really, really like. We both moved towards the car, feeling very, very scared, when my older brother came running around the corner and grabbed both of us and pulled us back. I don't know what would have happened if we got into the car, but I am sure that nothing good would have happened. Anyways, shortly after that, Kathy's mother came around and picked us up and took us back to her place, and Kathy's father turned out to be a man called Bernie. So I met my first Bernie. Anyway, for a couple of years after we returned, we moved around a bit trying to find a house to buy because there was 5 children, that's a lot of kids, and eventually we settled into a house in East Melbourne. What my parents did not know about the house was that it had been owned by an alcoholic who had been fairly brutal to his wife. His death had put the house on the market, but his energy stayed with the house. The next few years, myself and most of my siblings were haunted by nightmares and strange events. This house affected every one of us. For me, it was particularly bad as the fire had also awoken my latent abilities with clairvoyance. So I'd started seeing spirits and hearing voices, but I didn't know what to do with them. So I really didn't talk to anybody except for my mum about them. By now, I'd also started gymnastics, deciding that this would be my future path. So I'd gone off the medicine, figuring that that was taken away from me, but I thought that I would become a professional athlete. However, as I got older, I started to get into a fair bit of trouble because I was unstoppable in my interest in partaking in dangerous activities. For instance, I liked to jump off our garage roof onto the ground next door, which was a very solid tennis court. And that was probably about, I think, 9 or 10 feet tall. And there was me at 7 or 8 or 9 years of age leaping off this thing, playing war games and all kinds of stuff. I was pretty naughty, and I would climb up buildings and walk around the outside if I could, and things like that. So I was a bit, I was hard work. I was also being bullied at school, and at the moment this was primary school. So school was a nightmare for me, and trouble was my escape. So I would tolerate school when I was there, and then I would come home and I would nick off on my scooter or jump off buildings and get up to all sorts of mischief. I wasn't unhappy at home, but I knew that I was different from my siblings, and I was often treated quite differently too. It was like I was hard to see amidst all the clutter of 4 difficult siblings. So I began to slip between the cracks of family life. The other place where I really excelled was in English. So writing and sports, if I wanted parental attention, those were the areas that it was given. A lot of my time became consumed with sports, and I began to make a name amongst sports trainers. I was excellent at running and track and field, and fairly fearless with gymnastics. As I said, I turned my attention to the Olympics. But all of this is important because heaven would have to find a way to stop my interest if I was to become what they wanted. When I was 15, I started dating a young man and we became close. He lived a few miles away from me and would mostly meet at his home because it was less crowded and there was definitely less parental supervision. His parents were both busy working and drinking, and it was a very Australian household. So a group of us would spend most weekends there, with me walking home in the evenings. One weekend it became later than I realised, and I had to run home because obviously I had a curfew. So I set off running at a good clip, and then I crossed some railway tracks to cut time. Halfway across, I tripped and I jumped up immediately, but despite wearing thick denim, my right leg began to hurt very badly, and I could feel something trickling down the inside of my jeans. So, puzzled, I jumped up onto the station platform and went to the bathroom. Once inside, I pulled up my jeans leg and I saw this thick white loop of something sticking out of my leg. And I thought something had gone in. I couldn't figure out why, but I was very distressed. Now, I also had an interest in knife throwing. I loved knife throwing. I was very good at it, still am very good at it. So I actually used to carry a knife with me wherever I went, down my boots. So I pulled out the knife, grabbed this thing, and I cut it off. Immediately, I was in a lot more pain and I could not walk properly. So I went to the phone booth that was nearby, hopping my way, and I rang my mother. She came and picked me up, took me home, and she took me to the doctor the next day. It turned out that I had cut off a ligament and my track, field and gymnastics dreams ended right there. So that was out of the way. I learned to walk and run again, but never with the same passion. During the time I was rehabilitating, another very curious event happened. I was lying on the side grass out the front of my parents' home with two of my girlfriends, and we were just talking about life after the year 2000, wondering what changes would happen, when out of my mouth, with no conscious thoughts, I said, I will die when I'm 47. My girlfriends and I laughed at the bizarre statement, but I felt a chill. Not long after that, and I was at senior school by now, the bullying at my school became so intense and cruel that I actually became suicidal. My parents took me out of that school and enrolled me in the nearest high school at my request. It didn't take too long before I made friends there, but then I got sprung with a group of kids who were smoking. The whole lot of us were suspended, and even though I had not been one of the smokers, I was included. I was so upset and actually quite embarrassed that I left school and found a job within a few days. Then I presented my argument to my parents for not going back to school, and I won. So I just turned 15 now. I was out of school, I had a job, and then came Christmas, a season that I loved. Christmas morning, as usual, all of the kids got up and waited around the tree for our parents to get up and hand out presents. Present after present was handed out and given to all my siblings, but so far nothing for me. So I just kept waiting patiently until the last gift was gone, and still I had been given nothing. And feeling very shocked, I got up, left the lounge room, heading towards my bedroom, when both my parents walked out behind me very quickly. My mother started speaking at once, apologising and saying to me that she couldn't believe she had forgotten to get something for me. And my father grabbed his wallet and handed me some cash. Then Mum said she could take me shopping when the shops opened again. I walked into my room, packed a bag, and left my home. I did not return there again for almost 3 years. Something that utterly devastated my parents and my grandparents both. The next 3 years, you can imagine, were a lot of fun and a lot of adventures. I learned to ride motorbikes and drive cars, although I didn't get my official license until I turned 19, I think. I just drove and rode without a license. My boyfriend at the time, Ian, and I started a motorcycle gang, and which we called the Executioners, and we got into more than a bit of trouble. And just for reference, that is the Executioners. I'm the one taking the photo. And that's me on my motorbike again. One day we were out at the local fish and chip shops when a loner rolled up. He got to talking to us all and we all liked him. We ran into him a few more times and he asked if he could ride with us. The guys explained to him that I, the only female, was the president and he had to get my approval. I told him that he had to try to land a punch on me. With all my athletic and gymnastics training, I was fast and I was fierce. So he tried. I hit back, knocked him to the ground and broke his nose. From there, he did join us, which was pretty amazing, but he did. And I met Zeb. What I didn't know was that Zeb's real name was Bernie. After a few months of riding with us, Zeb confessed to me that he'd fallen in love with me. I was still with Ian of course. However, one night I came home from work to my flat that I shared with Ian and another guy, Bones, to find the place empty. No note, no mobile phones back then. In fact, we had no landline, cost too much. Eventually, one of the other members rolled up and I asked him where everybody was. He told me that they were at Zeb's house and I asked him to ride me over there. He did, but very reluctantly. I got to Zeb's house and I walked in. Everyone went quiet when I arrived, and so I began to walk around the house, opening doors and having a look. I found Ian in the back bedroom having sex with a woman he had just met that evening. The guys had dared him and he thought that he could get away with it. I said a few words, probably unpleasant, walked out and went outside where I found Zeb sitting on his Harley, and I asked him to take me away from there. I did not go back to my flat ever, and I did not speak to Ian for about 15 years, although we are great friends now and he has apologised profusely for what he did to me. At last, accidentally, I was with Bernie, but I didn't discover this until I asked him his real name. So one day when we'd been going out together for a few months, just kind of like living at other people's houses and moving around a lot, I asked Bernie to come and meet my family with me. So this is the first time they had seen me in years. I walked in through the back door of their house into a family room. I said, "G'day, Mum. G'day, Dad. This is Zeb." And then I said, who knows why, "We're getting married." I don't know why I said that. We hardly knew each other and we were both very young and we hadn't discussed anything close to marriage. But that is what came out of my mouth and my life snowballed from there. In less than 4 months, Bernie and I were married. Although it was a great wedding and a lot of fun, I knew it wasn't what I wanted. However, it was what Bernie wanted. So I asked him for a divorce the same night we married and he asked me to give it a chance and I agreed. Not long after that, I began to bleed heavily when I got my period and the bleeding wouldn't stop. I went to see a gynecologist obstetrician and he suggested that he do an exploratory operation in case I had miscarried. I agreed and off to hospital I went. And the following is what I was told happened. They anaesthetised me, began surgery and my heart stopped. I had had a small heart attack. So they stopped the surgery, put me into recovery, and when I woke up, they told me what had happened and that they wanted me to stay in overnight just to be sure that everything would continue. But what happened for me was that I once again found myself in that place and I knew I was dead again. I re-met Metatron and Jesus and was informed that I had married the wrong Bernie. I needed to end this relationship. Of course, I did not want to end it and I came back very depressed. Not long after that, I found out that I was pregnant and my first son was born. However, before my son was born, Bernie got involved in some mischief that I won't talk about, but it went too far and a bunch of mates of him and his mates ended up burning down an empty house and I was at home 8 months pregnant. However, I think that was a Saturday night, but on the Monday morning, my front door was kicked in by a lot of police and I was taken to a police station where I was held for about 10 hours being interviewed. I knew that this would end my marriage sooner or later, and I was horrified because I was a fun larrikin, but I never did anything that would harm another in a devastating way, unless I got in a fight, I suppose. And needless to say, that was incredibly traumatic for me. My son was born and Bernie and I moved to the country. After we had been there for about a year, Bernie had a brief affair with someone, and when I found out, I packed my son and some clothes for us both and left the marriage. It took me 14 years to actually divorce Bernie, and when I finally did, he came to court with me and asked me to marry him again. And that was one of the worst days of my life. However, the universe was still on the hunt to find the real Bernie. I eventually met another man, we dated, we got engaged, then we moved in together. By that time, I had started a fashion design and creation business that was doing very well. I was making hand knit jumpers for George's that was open then, and I had clients all around the world designing clothes for them. I did another number of band costumes, and was also making men's clothing and lingerie. So I was earning a good living, and I was doing well enough to employ people to help me. One day, my guides, who I could hear but not control when we spoke, told me to go look at the local paper, and so I did. I walked outside, grabbed the local paper, and while I was walking inside, I just flicked it open and landed on a page that was full of those ads. One of the ads was for a school of massage, and I had absolutely no interest in massage. I'd never had a massage, and I really wasn't that fond of being touched due to the pain with touch I had learnt through the fire. But I felt compelled, so I contacted the school. I enrolled, and I attended the first orientation class the same night. Now, I went up to the front of the room, into the furthest corner, and I sat there quietly, minding my own business while I was waiting for the rest of the students to come in, when my guide spoke again. "Turn around," the voice said. I did. "He's here." I spotted a man just as he seemed to spot me, and as toy as it sounds, our eyes locked, and I knew Bernie had arrived. We became excellent friends. Both of us were otherwise committed. He was married and I was engaged. So despite acknowledging that there was a real frisson between us, we took no action. I fell accidentally pregnant, and when I told my fiance I was pregnant, he flipped out and started threatening to kill me if I did not have an abortion. Now, this is a man who was just over 2 meters tall and about this wide. He was big and he was strong. And I was pretty scared, in truth, and I refused and I left. I just packed up my bags, grabbed my son and went. So I continued the pregnancy on my own, busy looking after my son, managing my business and trying to get on with a life that felt otherwise completely ruined. I had lost contact with B2, as I called him, and considered that to be a dead loss now. The day came that I was going to give birth. I went to hospital in labour and I settled into wait. Just as my son was about to be born, I started to bleed again uncontrollably. At the same time, my son was born dead. The nursing staff took him away immediately and set about reviving him, whilst the other staff tried to stave my bleeding. I heard the nurses talking, calling out my son's APGAR score as they went. Finally, they came back and told me that he was alive and breathing, but had cerebral palsy. I started crying as they wheeled me to the theatre, and once again, there I was in that place. You have a choice, I was told. You can continue on this path and we will help you to use this energy, or you can live a normal life, but this is what it will be like. They showed me a life where I would be bored, unsatisfied and quite disconnected. I would feel no peace, no satisfaction. Then the life they wanted for me was shown, and it would also be hard, but I would help a lot of people and I would feel content. To me, there was no choice. I chose their life, but I cried. About a week later, I was sent home from hospital with my son. I had received 6 units of whole blood plus additional IV fluids before they would allow me to go home. Once they were satisfied that my volume levels were normal enough, they stopped all the fluids. Then I went home, but back to my parents because I was too weak to go back to my own house with a new baby. So my parents allowed me to live with them. And this was actually the happiest time of my life ever. My parents and I reconnected on a very deep level and got to know and love each other as people. Then I decided that I needed to learn how to handle my clairvoyant abilities. So I hunted around to find a teacher and was given a name and address. Going there, I knocked on this stranger's door, and the lady who opened it said, "What took you so long? I've been waiting for you." I was flummoxed. I thought she had mistaken me for someone else, but it turned out that it was me she had been waiting for. She took me inside her house and she gave me a reading which was spot on. I was pretty blown away. Then she told me that I could start training with her the following Saturday, as she had just graduated a student that day, which was, I think it was a Saturday. I paid her for her fee for the reading, left, and worked out a way to have my children cared for each Saturday. Thus, having already learned anatomy and physiology through the massage course and then self-studying the internal systems of the body, I was about to learn how to communicate with my guides. I learned very quickly. After a year, Jill, my teacher, told me that I was ready to practice on my own. I had graduated. She told me that I had graduated very quickly, but I could keep in touch. Within a few weeks, I had clients finding me from everywhere, and my sons and I were handling life together, still living with my parents to give them support because my father had been diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma at that stage. And this is where my medical intuition career started. Having everything I felt I needed, my guides, who I now knew as Hiram, the physician, Peter, the reader, and Josh, the door opener, would not give any information that wasn't somehow medically based. For instance, one client who I was seeing came to me, and she was about 6 months pregnant and had worked very hard to actually get pregnant. This was an IVF baby, and my guides told me to tell her that there was something wrong with the pregnancy and that the baby was being killed, that there was a growth inside her uterus that looked like it was a tumor and overtaking the baby. And she left my rooms and went straight to her doctor, organised an ultrasound, which they did, and they found out that there is a cancer that only grows when you are pregnant, and it will overtake and kill the baby. So what they did was put her into hospital, performed a cesarean, removed the tumour. This is what Patsy told me, removed the tumour, replaced the baby, stitched her up, and she had to stay in hospital until the baby was safe enough to be born. It was very high risk, and I don't think it had been done very often. And for instance, another client came to me by appointment, and she was suffering from depression and nothing was helping her. So she brought her daughter with me, who was, grown up about in her 30s. And as her daughter was an adult, I wasn't concerned. My guides began to speak to me, and they asked me to tell my client that she was really depressed because of the situation with her children. When I relayed that, my client was very puzzled, and she said that I was wrong. She had 3 daughters and they were all very well, and the family was balanced and they were all happy. And then Peter actually said to me, ask her daughter to leave the room. So I relayed that message, and the daughter duly left. Once alone, Peter told me to tell her that the depression was because she had 4 children, not 3, and she needed to stop lying about that. My client burst into tears and then relayed the story to me, which was that she and her husband had fallen pregnant accidentally, had the child, and put him up for adoption. This was their only son. Her other 3 children, born after they had married, were all girls. She had never told any of her daughters about their brother, and she was really sad, wondering about how he had grown up. Was it a good life? Was he happy? Had they made a mistake? So she asked her daughter to come back into my room, and whilst I sat there with them both, she told her daughter about her son. With them both crying now, I ushered them out and sent them home. My job was done. It was after that that I decided that I needed to actually learn counselling skills, so I did. And yes, she did find her son, and her depression became manageable. But from that point on, I was officially a medical intuitive, although that term was not yet invented. So to the last NDE, which if you have read about or seen the videos on YouTube about me, I was dead for 47 minutes from when the ambulance arrived. And it's actually a fire truck that arrived. They were the first paramedics. But from when they arrived and set me up and started timing, it was 47 minutes. When my husband found me, and he was a paramedic. I was blue. And spiritually, I was bored with standing around and waiting. So who knows how long I was dead for in truth. But to the last NDE, how that came to be was when I was about 40, after my fourth child, a daughter, was born, I began to ail. My body was struggling, and when I did a session on myself, I could see a tumour in my brain. My blood pressure started rising uncontrollably, and I was exhausted all the time, but I could not sleep. I went to see my doctor and I told her that I thought I had Cushing's disease, which is an uncommon illness. She disputed me strongly and wanted me to go on to antidepressants. So I went home and I took the antidepressants initially. I think I took 2 when I had a seizure, and an ambulance was called and I was taken to hospital where they did all sorts of tests, including a lumbar puncture. But when I got up and I went to the toilet, I looked in the mirror and I could see that my pupils were vastly different sizes. So I went back out to the doctor who'd been treating me and I asked him to look at my pupils. And he did. And immediately he was very concerned that I had a brain tumour. Anyway, they released me with me promising to go and have further tests. And then I went home to do some research and find a way to convince my doctor to send me to an endocrinologist. I'd already chosen an endocrinologist that I knew would be the right person for me. So I went back to my doctor a few weeks later with the name, asking again for the referral. Again, she refused. So I asked her what was wrong with her eye, and the question just fell out of my mouth, but my doctor reacted vehemently, telling me to keep my mumbo jumbo to myself. But then she wrote the referral, and so finally I got in to see the endocrinologist, who similarly did not believe me initially. Nonetheless, she started testing me with every test she could come up with, and in the end she confirmed my diagnosis that I had Cushing's disease, and she offered surgery to me, which I refused. And then when I went to see my doctor, I found that she was on sick leave, and I later found out that she had ocular cancer, which she had her eyes tested after I told her my mumbo jumbo, and she discovered she had ocular cancer. And even though she's now retired, she and I became very good friends, and she does have a glass eye now. So for about 7 years, I managed my condition very well. Then I became exhausted and absolutely feeling desperate. So I finally agreed to have surgery on my tumour. The surgery failed in its first attempt. So, you wait 6 months and you have further tests, and I did that. And the cortisol levels were raised, so it failed. So a second surgery was undertaken. Again, it failed. So with no further option, I still had Cushing's. So still recovering from pituitary surgery and feeling quite despondent because I hadn't managed to beat this either with my energy or with surgery, I finally took some time off work. At this stage, I was seeing probably about 28 clients a week, and my books were about 16 weeks booked out in advance. And I knew that this was going to really cause problems for me, but I needed a good few weeks off at least. I'd also started the College of Medical Intuition, and I'd done this in case I couldn't save myself, wanting to make sure that I passed on this work and the energy to the world. So my first group of participants in the college had graduated, and the next intake was already full. So I was under the pump to get up to speed very quickly. At the end of my break, I think, I died on it was a Saturday or Sunday morning, and I was due to start work on Tuesday. And at the end of my break, literally 3 days before my business started up again, I attended a wedding. And whilst I was getting ready to go, I looked in the mirror whilst I put on my makeup, and all I could see when I looked in this mirror was death in my eyes. That was all I could see. And I knew that I would die that night. So I told Bernie, and he comforted me. darling, I'm going to die tonight. So if you get woken up, please pay attention, kind of thing. We had a great time at the wedding. We came home and we went to bed as usual. The next thing that I was aware of was that I was standing up in my bedroom staring at my own body. This time I was not critically ill when I died. I was, however, 47 by now. My heart had simply become stuck for reasons unknown, and I had died quietly. I was not under anesthesia, nor was I in pain. There was no mental disassociation. I'd simply gone to bed and fallen asleep and then died. So when I came awake, I was standing next to my bed, quite literally sleeping on my feet. And it was me nearly falling over in spirit that finally woke me. I realised that the world felt like it was gently rocking too, just as it might feel to anyone who woke in the middle of the night, busting to go to the toilet. Absolutely exhausted, you might stumble to the toilet and then hop back into bed. I thought to myself, perhaps I am just dreaming. Perhaps this is an illusion, although it did not feel like an illusion. So I thought that I would try to get back into my body. I sat down on the bed and I tried to lean back. And the next second I knew I was poof, there with no feeling of anything other than I was lying down and then I'm back. I tried a few more times. Same thing happened. And then I decided that I was not going to be allowed to get back into my body. So I needed help, or I was going to be truly dead and I didn't feel ready to die. And as nothing and no one had appeared yet to make me move on, I was actually feeling frightened that this would be my world from now on, that I would actually be a ghost. And I couldn't imagine anything worse than that, of being a ghost. So I began to yell out to my husband. I'm yelling out, Bernie, wake up, I need you to wake up, I'm dead. Eventually, I don't know how long it took, he actually did wake up and I was pretty elated. I thought, oh, thank God I'm saved. So he rolled out of bed, stood up, and he went to the toilet and I thought, oh no, I'm done for. So I actually did this time successfully sit down on my bed. I just sat there on the corner of my bed thinking, what am I going to do now? I'm stuffed. After a few minutes, Bernie came back from the toilet, hopped into bed, climbed in next to me, rolled over to give me a kiss. And the next thing I hear is he said, oh my God, Carmel, what have you done? And he turned on the light, found me lying on my back, and I was blue. So he ran out of our room to one of my son's bedroom and told him to quickly call the ambulance, that his mother was dead. Then he ran back into our room, and he started giving me CPR. He didn't want to move me from the bed onto the floor because he thought that he would possibly damage me, getting me from the bed to the floor. So he started CPR. I don't know again how long, because I just stood around watching him, and then the doorway did appear. This tube sort of thing of light came and I stepped into it, and again I was in heaven. And I started speaking to Metatron and to Jesus again, and they told me that I had done what they had wanted me to do, and now if I chose to, I could choose to stay dead, or I could go back and continue. But this time I was really much freer to choose. Whilst with them, I thought about my family and my husband, and I thought that, we had 4 children and 3 of them were in the autism spectrum. So 2 of them are oppositional defiance disorder, and I knew that Bernie and they would have a very tough life if I wasn't there to help direct them and mould them and teach them how to behave that, which we've successfully done, and they're 2 incredible children, and one of them was fully an Asperger and really did not know how to relate to people, and now he is 31 and has a friendship group and works, and is a successful young man. Anyway, so there I am in heaven, and I would pop back from heaven to earth and I would observe what's going on. And finally, after the conversation I had with Jesus and Metatron, where I told them I would like to try and continue this work, they said to me, if you don't go back now, it will be too late. We won't be able to heal your brain. So I came back into my room, and before I got into my body, or actually tried, I observed the scene, and I saw that my bed had been pushed out of the way and I was lying on the floor, and that there were, and I think there was about 8 or 9 people standing in my room. A couple were genuine ambulance officers, but the rest were firemen. And I watched as they gave me another shock and then 2 more shots of adrenaline. And finally, one of them, Glenn, I think his name was, called out that he was going to stop. It was too late. So I slipped back into my body, and then I took a breath as deeply as I could, and they all sat back in shock and went, oh, she's alive. What happened? So from there, they took me to hospital where I was in a coma, which was another interesting experience I never, ever, ever want to go through again, I must say. And from there, I really do not know what to tell you, because the journey really was learning how to be comfortable with being a near-deather again, and looking at the patterns of my life, where I found that from when I died at 4 and being told that I would be this non-doctored doctor, heaven has manipulated my life to the point where I left home. And earlier on, my grandparents had tried to adopt me, and in fact had taken me, and my father drove over, picked me up and took them away and told them that they would never get me, that I belonged to his family. And so I spent a lot of time with them, but I didn't live with them. But I left home at 15, which was a very stupid age, and I'd learnt to be tough by joining the motorcycle gang. So I was pretty much immune to people challenging me or disbelieving me. And then I learned how to heal my body so that I can walk again, and so that my brain damage is healed, and that the fire damage is quite minimal, and how to, I guess, get blood being created in my body quite quickly. I don't even know all the lessons I've learned. And I did do a counselling course, a very brief counselling course too, so that I would be able to help people if I triggered them. My life as a medical intuitive is the only thing that has ever given me peace in this life. It's actually a very emotional thing for me. It's a very emotional thing for me to talk about, because I don't know if I have ever been allowed to be me. Anyway, that's all I've got to say. So if anybody would like to save me by asking questions, I would deeply appreciate it. Thank you. Nobody? If I begin to cry, please don't be worried. As I said, this is actually incredibly emotional to me. It is actually a very hard story to relay.
Can I ask you a question? Or do you
Sure.
need some time?
Yeah, no, ask your question, please.
You've seen the 2 speakers we had before.
Yeah.
Talking about healing, and William Benson said that he did healing, and John Weber spoke about how he sort of facilitated people's crises. Your past lives. Do you see yourself as a healer?
I am.
The work that you're doing, do you get sort of like a direct effect of something sort of paranormal, parapsychological going on?
Do I heal other people? Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I do.
And not just in a consultative way, but do you think there's something more?
Yeah.
Moving across between 2 souls, as it were.
Yes, I do. I do. And I also find that people are drawn to me. They don't know me from it, but even if I go out in a crowd, people will come up to me and talk to me. And same with animals. For instance, my cat, who's 19, has oral cancer, and I've been working on him, and he's gone from the vet saying no hope, let's put him down, to now he's living on painkiller, and I hope to completely reduce his cancer.
Thank you. Well, I wanted to just say that was a really touching story, and it was so raw and vulnerable, and you've had such a colourful life. It's really fascinating.
Yeah, it has been very it is very challenging for me to talk about. I actually deeply appreciate that you've given me an opportunity to talk about it. This is the first time I've got through one of these talks without bursting into hugely embarrassing, wails of tears. Thank you.
Oh, no, I loved it. I've got a question. I'm wondering, do you know why you were drawn to dangerous things? And
Yes, I do know why I was drawn to dangerous things, and believe you me, I'm a lunatic, and because I had to have no fear, and for a long time I literally, I'm actually diagnosed Asperger and oppositional defiance disorder too. And only this last near-death experience has changed that in me. But before that, you couldn't stop me. You literally couldn't stop me. Anybody challenged me, I'd just front in, and people would say, stick your hand into the fire. I would. I just didn't give a damn about anything, jump off things. I don't know. I don't believe that anybody who is timid and is afraid would be able to do what I do. As everybody, even if they're a psychiatrist or a psychologist or anybody in this, in the mental health profession, to even admit that you understand that there is life after death is hugely challenging. My older brother is a professor of neuropsychology, and he says to me, don't tell people that we're related. That is, I am not allowed to claim a connection to my older brother. And as a psychologist, my mother is the only psychologist that I actually refer clients to, because she's the only one who knows about this and is comfortable with it, although I may have found another couple today. Mightn't I?
Yeah. Yes, definitely. Yeah. Wow. Russ, sorry, Russ, did you have a question?
Yeah, actually I do. So Carmel, one of the things that is outstanding in NDE research is the dramatic, massive and permanent transformative effect that NDEs have on people. Of course, you had your first NDE at a very early age, so perhaps that transformation wasn't so marked because you hadn't sort of followed the normal path that most people do. But the particular aspect of transformation that I'm really interested in is, besides losing their fear of death, experiences usually develop a completely renewed sense of purpose and meaning in life, and a sense of joy, which is very much removed from the usual things that people go for in the world, like money, power and status and so forth. I'm just wondering if you could speak to that in your particular case, as to your sense of meaning and purpose.
I don't believe that I can speak to that, because that is not, in my experience, that never happened. I came back at 4, incredibly distressed with the knowledge that my life as I wanted it to be would be not allowed to happen, and I began to lose people, and all my life I have lost people and friends. Even in the dog park, for instance, one lady told another lady that I was a medical intuitive, and the other lady who I'd been friends with now keeps away from me. My children were drummed and physically brutalised out of their primary school because of my profession. And I would walk into the school and people would turn their backs on me, even my next door neighbour, turn their backs on me, so that nobody would talk to me because I was a medical intuitive, even though a few of them were my clients. When I died, not long after I married, I lost a lot of friends that I had made and retained at schools. When I died at 29, when I had my third son, same thing. A lot of people in my family, for instance, my cousins, and one of my aunts used to specialise in going to see my parents and telling them, you know that Carmel is schizophrenic, don't you? You know she needs to be committed. And in fact, at 14, my dad did take me to Malvern Clinic to have me committed, thanks to his sister convincing him and our local doctor giving him a referral. He walked me in, holding my hand, told them I was here, and they said, just sit down and wait and we'll get somebody to take her in. And he sat next to me holding my hand, and we're sitting there waiting for probably 5 to 10 minutes. And he finally said, come on, Carmel, you don't belong here. And he walked me out of that hospital. He literally saved my life, you know, doing that, because I know exactly what they would have done to me if I had been left in there. My life, and when you talk about belief in God, I have no belief because I have knowledge. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like, belief relies on not being certain, but understanding. But you can't say to somebody, yes, I know, absolutely, I know that absolutely that exists, and that is belief. Whereas I don't have belief, and I do feel cheated by that, I will be honest. I find that people who have that belief, still with the allowance to doubt, gives them a more profound sense of belief. Whereas me, I know they're right here. I know they're here with me, watching me talk. And I know that if they didn't want me to feel this trauma, that they could alter it.
Mm.
And they let me go through it. And I'm not trying to say that they're wrong or that I'm angry with them or whatever. I have been very angry with them. I remember my back veranda is just behind me, and I can promise you that probably about 3 years ago, if you'd come over to visit me one night, you would have found me out of my back veranda, a little bit drunk, swinging punches at the air. Like, I'm going to punch you, you bastards.
Oh.
You know? Oh, I was furious, like absolutely furious, you know, because even no, there's so much to say with that. I know that heaven is real. Nobody can say or do anything that will convince me otherwise. I just say ha ha when they try to. But you know, publishers have turned down my book because of the topic. I've been asked to speak and then cancelled when they find out that I'm like so many things have been taken away from me because I don't wear purple ring bells and you know, do all that sort of stuff. Like, I stand there and I say it is provable that heaven exists.
Just on that, I just would like to add, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but there was an essay writing competition last year in America with like $1 million prize.
Oh, I should
proof, yeah, for proof of I can't think of the name of it now. I'm sure Lance will know.
Yeah.
To write, you know, like a scientific, you know, solid essay.
Yeah.
For scientific proof of post-mortem survival.
Right.
And they got hundreds of applications from very, very heavy duty academics from around the world. And the submissions were so excellent that they couldn't just give out one prize. They ended up giving awards to 14 people that submitted the essays. Do you know the name of that thing, Lance?
That was the Bigelow Institute.
Bigelow
Business Studies. Yeah, they launched, like you said, that essay contest. They had categories of, I think, first prize $500,000 US.
Yeah,
not too bad. That went to Jeffrey Mishlove, and I think well worth it. Yeah, you can go online and find them.
I totally want to read them. Have you read them?
Some there were second prizes and third prizes as well, so, and multiple prizes at the lower levels. I think $20,000 was the smallest they paid out.
Sounds wonderful. I've never heard of it, though. Somebody did put up there in the conversation, I know, it's Robert Bigelow.
Yeah.
Is that it?
Robert Bigelow of the Skinwalker Ranch. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, he's had a lot of tragedy in his life. I think a son suicided, and a couple of relatives suicided in his family. So you can see where the interest in the afterlife comes from.
Have people considered suicides? Because I can tell you, when my time in heaven, I asked about a lot of things. I'm a very, very curious person, and so I asked about suicide, and was that verboten, and homosexuality and all sorts of stuff, and I was very clearly and firmly told that no, homosexuality is not forbidden, and neither is suicide forbidden, but it is a sign of a soul that is deeply in distress. They will have to come back and continue the lesson that they have walked away from. So, there's no way out of it.
Yeah, well, you get sacred texts that set up the rules, the commandments and what's to be forbidden and what isn't. I mean, we basically invent that. It's our attempt to struggle when it becomes part of the culture, but like you say, where's actually inscribed? Yeah, it's just it's life and death.
I know. I'd rather take my kind of footnote from Mel Brooks, The Meaning of Life, when he comes out with, these are the 10 commandments. Have you seen that?
Yeah.
I love it.
Yep.
That is where I take my kind of belief from.
I was just thinking, Carmel, you talked about like shaking your fist,
Yeah.
Don't we all? It may take something away, and then you'll be pissed off again. If you could have your life the way you think it should be, you may lose something. And
I don't know how I think it should. I mean, I have no concept of how it should be. And honestly, being a medical intuitive is the only thing that really gives me peace. But what I would like is to have a greater acceptance in my own community. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
For people to not look at me like I'm bizarre, or they don't stop me like, they find out, they go, oh, you're a medical intuitive. What can you see on me? And my first response to that is, I see nothing. Have you paid me?
Yeah. I think a lot of people that are responding to you are psychic and don't even realize it.
Yeah.
And it's more about them than you.
Yeah. I know.
Afraid of something, or afraid of dealing, or afraid of confronting something they don't like about themselves, and so you're a threat.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that now. But like when you're, say, 15 or 20 or whatever, it's really, really tough. Really tough.
Yeah.
I don't train people. When I train people, I don't train people who are unduly young, because it is really tough to go out in the world and do what I do without being hurt if you aren't solid in what you are. Yes, I believe that I will run the course one more time. I understand that I don't have a great amount of time left on planet Earth, so I will run it one more time.
When are you thinking of doing that?
I was thinking of
starting.
That's kind of tricky, because it's basically send me a message on my Facebook, in Medical Intuitive page, and I will send you out a prospectus. I am not an office worker. How's that? I am not an office worker, and I blow up computers more than I do anything else with them. And so I have to get somebody else to do a lot of the, loading and uploading and all this kind of stuff. But the best way is to send me a message on Facebook Messenger saying that you're interested in looking at the prospectus. My basic course is 12 months in duration, and I teach you, I have other teachers coming in so that you are taught anatomy and physiology and basic counselling skills, along with how to see and feel and diagnose energy, and then what you need to do to heal it. Yeah.
Thank you. What did you find was most healing for you after your experience?
What did I find from other people healing me? Do you mean?
Oh no. What did you find was most healing? This is from Max.
The most healing thing was actually self-acceptance, and really self-acceptance. You've no idea how, like, even after this last NDE, I've struggled for the last few years to find a psychologist or a psychiatrist that I can sit down and talk with. And I've gone through probably about 10. I've had first sessions with about 10 people who have said to me pretty much off the bat that they don't believe in what's happened. And they want to talk about my family history, find out where, I don't know, I was thrown to the wolves or locked in a cupboard or something, like that, became delusional, I don't know. But apart from that, the most healing thing was, for me, out of everything over the years, was my father sitting down with me, holding my hand and not saying a word, just holding my hand in such a way that I knew that he knew my pain. He was a shaman, by the way, trained by the American Indians.
Wow. Wow. Any other questions for Carmel?
Oh, I can tell you all that blue is not my colour. I look hideous when my skin is blue. So.
Oh, yes.
And I often tell people that I'm a zombie, just to amuse them.
Maybe one more question. Tell us about the Metatronic Energy.
Who's asking that?
Me.
Oh, right. Right. Well, look, every energy has its signature, right, frequency.
Mm-hmm.
And Metatronic Energy is vibrationally, it's a very high level energy, and it's designed to actually clear things from your body physically and emotionally. So if somebody comes to see me and they're, like very upset and they can't get over an incident or a series of incidences, I use Metatronic Energy on them, and it trickles down through their body quite slowly. It takes anything up to 3 weeks to finish a cycle going through, so it'll keep like trickling down through and working, and it pushes the energy of those memories out of the body. And while you go through it, you will remember things or feel things or have dreams about things that have bothered you or related to that. You even come across physical things, like people may come back into your life temporarily, or you'll find photos, that kind of thing. And you get rid of them, not the memory. So you're left with the memory, but you can look at it and be reasonably dispassionate about it. You can examine them with more clarity. And by doing that, the body starts to repair. So, the real tough injuries on my body, like, if I showed you the hole where I cut the ligament out, you can still see that in my leg, this nice hole, but I can operate my leg quite normally. And I had to do that for a while on my leg to be able to walk properly. And I did learn to do cartwheels and handstands and backflips and hang off things again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wow, and is that something that people can access?
I pass
Or
it
how
on.
do they?
When I train people to be a medical intuitive like me, I pass on a few different signatures of energy. So like I pass on bioenergy, which is like bacon and eggs, for instance. So you're feeling very tired, you just put some bacon and eggs into you, as it were, and that will revitalize your body. If you've got a headache, for instance, for those people who know their medical terms, I had trigeminal neuralgia, for instance, and which is, they actually call that the suicide migraine, because there basically is no cure for it. And I managed to cure that. That was officially diagnosed. I had no way, and I didn't think to myself, what am I going to do this? But, I was living on extremely solid painkillers to get me through. And then I thought, well, I'm going to work. I like medicine. I like doctors and dentists and all that sort of stuff. I'm not adverse to them at all. So, for instance, I'll go off and have a vaccine or, whatever, take Panadol if I get a headache. And if it doesn't work, I'll use energy. Or if it's something I know they can't do anything with, I'll use energy.
Great. Thank you, Carmel. Really, really enjoyed your story, your talk, and just really revealing such personal life. Events in your life. It's really wow, the characters in your life as well. And
some of them have certainly been fascinating characters.
Yeah, wonderful. I hope that in the near future or the future we can be more accepting.
Yeah.
And yeah, especially of the psychic phenomena and the healing.
It's getting more and more proven and known. So I'm sure we will. Mm-hmm. It's just, it is a threatening ability, isn't it? To people who don't understand it. And the idea that somebody could walk close to you, or not even close, and pick up things that you're feeling or doing or whatever is quite frightening, yes. But if somebody is doing that without your permission, they are actually being, immoral. You shouldn't read another person without their permission. And, it's pretty rude. Like, it's like picking up their diary and reading that and going, yeah, great, found out these secrets. That's a no-no. Mm. And but it is, the energetic healing is also getting more research. So that's good. Yes, yeah, I'm hopeful. Yeah. Well, thank you, and thank you for all the work you do as well. I'm sure the many people you've helped really appreciate it. And for forging this, new, old, ancient. Yeah. Anyway, thank you again, Carmel. We have come to the close of this conference, and I really want to thank you, Carmel, and all the other speakers, Bill Bengston, John Webber, as well. And I want to thank Lance for helping me and Rob for helping me organise this conference. Also to all you people for joining us. Without you, we wouldn't have a conference. So thank you so much for your passion in this area. I hope to have more and more as time goes on. That would be great, Joyce. Really good. Yeah. So my summary, I like to do a bit of a summary, is that set your intention and you can store the healing in cotton and water. We are one soul with many lives, and we can heal by releasing trauma, perhaps from some of our past lives as well. And also there's life after life, and we are not alone, and to be more compassionate and self-accepting, no matter how different we are, and to other people as well. Yep.
I think we really need that. And connection, you know, this is all about connection. Everything's connected. We're connected. We are all connected. We're connected to the super consciousness and to nature all around us. So that's what I got from it.
Yep.
Yeah. Thank you.
Right.
Okay, so thank you again. And yeah, Carmel has written
When all else fails.
When all else fails. Healing Me, Healing You. Yes, that's available on Amazon.
Yeah.
And also she's on Facebook, Medical Intuitive Life Consciousness Creator. A lot of wisdom there and knowledge to impart. So if you're interested in that, I would encourage you to do her course. Might be the last one. All right.
Have a great day.
Thank you, everyone. Maybe we'll see you in another event.
Lovely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
And